Right, welcome to our IDEA training on proportionate share. So we'll just start with some general information. To meet the requirements of IDEA, every year each LEA must expend a proportionate share of federal IDEA funds on equitable services for parentally placed private school children. And this obligation to expend a proportionate share of federal funds is different from the responsibilities that the district has to the students who are enrolled in public schools or to students who are placed in a private school by a public agency rather than a parent. A parentally placed private school child is not entitled to individual services like they would be if they were in a public school. Instead, the LEA is just required to spend the proportionate amount of funds on the equitable services to this group of children. So if you've got 3 students with disabilities that have all been parentally placed in a private school, they are not entitled to individual services like they would be in a public school. The LEA is only required to spend that 3 students worth of dollars on equitable services. This is the formula that we use when we are determining the proportionate share. So you've got for each LEA, it'll be your total federal flow through amount divided by your total IDEA eligible public and private school students. So it would be your total number of eligible students attending private school. And then this would be that would be the eligible students, and then that would be multiplied by the the actual number of children who are parentally placed. And that will give you your total proportionate share for the parentally placed private school children. And again, that amount is not for individual services, but for equitable services for all students that are within that private school setting. One thing about the parentally placed private schools, the obligation for child find is still present for students enrolled in private schools. This is including religious private schools as well that are located within the boundaries of the district. So the child find is not part of the equitable services. It exists independently from that need. So the cost of child find activities, like evaluations, are not considered in determining whether the LEA has spent an appropriate amount of providing special education and related services. So again, say you've got those 3 students are parentally placed in their private school, and you have to conduct child find services. Those child find services do not count toward that 3 students worth of dollars for equitable services because of this child find obligation outside of equitable services. So one requirement for proportionate share is a consultation meeting. Like we said, since it is equitable services for all the students, there has to be a consultation meeting between the LEA and the private school officials and representative of parents. So in that case, within your consultation meeting, you have to discuss how the proportionate share is calculated. So going over the, showing that it is the total amount for the parentally placed students, and then looking, explaining the total amount across the district, determining how funds are going to be apportioned if they're insufficient to serve all students. So you've got 3 students, maybe one of them has, an individual need that could use up the entire 3 students worth of dollars. You're going to have to determine a way to provide equitable services for all 3 of those students with that amount of money. And then you also talk about allowable uses, direct and indirect services. And again, child find and evaluation costs are not allowable uses for that proportionate share. Some other requirements for the proportionate share is that after the consultation meeting has happened, the LEA needs to obtain a written affirmation statement from the private school representative to show that a timely and meaningful consultation has occurred. And so if the private school official does not believe that the consultation was timely or meaningful, or that the LEA was not giving the due consideration to their views, they have a right to file a formal complaint with us as the state. And the final requirement here would be your data collection and record keeping. Even though these children are parentally placed in these private schools, it is still the LEA's responsibility to collect information about the number of children who were evaluated, those who were determined to be children with disabilities, and the number of children who were actually served. For preschool requirements, this would be students age 3 through 5 who are enrolled in private schools. They're considered to be parentally placed if the private school or daycare program meets the definition of elementary school. And elementary school in the IDEA Part B regulations is defined as a nonprofit institutional day or residential school, including a public elementary charter school that provides elementary education as determined under Oregon law. And we know that in Oregon, our charter schools are all public schools. They are just considered to be another school within your district, whether they're online, they're treated just like a brick and mortar public school. And so if a student, age 3 to 5 is enrolled in a nonprofit institutional residential day school, they'll be considered parentally placed. And then to go along with that is that children with disabilities age 3 to 5 who are enrolled in a private school that does not meet the state's definition of elementary school are not eligible for equitable services. However, the obligation to make FAPE available to eligible children with disabilities age 3 through 5 remains. So that can be a bit of a gray area of what that looks like when you are not eligible for those equitable services, but the state still does need to make FAPE available. So if any district finds themselves in a situation like this and they are unsure about how to proceed, please reach out to us. We are more than happy to work with you to figure out the best way to go about that. The transportation requirements for proportionate share. If it's necessary for a student to, participate in their services, they have to be provided with transportation. It can be either from the school or the home to the site where the services take place, and then from the service back to the school or to the home. And this does not mean that just the school has to provide transportation from the home to the school. It's not a requirement to get students there and home. The requirement is to get students to these services and then back to either home or school, depending on where they need to go. So this transportation requirement is revolving around the services specifically. So what are equitable services? Equitable services are special education and related services, direct, indirect, that are provided to the parentally placed private school children with disabilities that are in accordance with IDEA and the implementing regulations. So again, an equitable service does not mean that they have an individual right to the services that they would have if they were enrolled in public school. And the IDEA does not prohibit an LEA from using additional funds to provide education or services. So if your IDEA is award, you have your proportionate share, say for those 3 students, but one of them has a more expensive program, but the LEA wants to be able to provide that, you can use more of your state or local funds to provide those services. As long as you as the LEA are meeting all the other requirements of IDEA, including FAPE, it is permissible for the LEA to spend more IDEA Part B funds than the proportion amount of IDEA funds. So like before, we said that you can use additional state or local dollars to provide services. As long as you are meeting all of your duties under IDEA, you can also then use more IDEA funds than the proportionate share. And in this, and the supplement and supplant rule kind of gets flipped on its head when it comes to proportionate share, because state and local funds can supplement your IDEA funds, but they cannot supplant the proportionate share. So again, if going back up 2 bullet points before this, that you've got your 3 students, one requires more services. And so you say, okay, we can provide this additional services through our state and local dollars. That doesn't mean that you can just disregard your IDEA dollars. You still have to use those IDEA dollars, but they can just be combined with either more IDEA or more state and local, but you just can't use only state and local for those private schools. So that was a pretty quick training. As always, please reach out to us with any questions. We are here to support our students first and foremost, and that means that we have to support our LEAs. We want, our kids to have as full and rich of an experience in the public school system as we can, and even, our private school students, that we are here for kids first and foremost, and we are more than happy to work with you guys. If there are any questions that we can't answer, we'll always take them to our Federal Technical Assistance Center. And, usually they can help us figure it out. And if we have any more questions, we're always, we like to be in conversation with our districts around these things so that, we can work together to get our students the best education possible.